What is up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls? We got episode 64 of the Be Greyt podcast. On today's episode, it's a big one. It's a big one. A little early to be doing this, probably. Maybe I'll do it again later on. We'll see if any major injuries or stuff happens to these teams. We'll see. But I'm gonna give my early playoff prediction here. That's what I'm going to do today. I decided, I'm just going to go ahead. There isn't much off-season content to really do, in my opinion. So I was like, you know what? Why don't I just go ahead and get my playoff stuff? I have it ready, so I might as well give it. I'm going to go down 12-1, right? And that's how we're going to do it. All right, that's how we're going to do it. I'll get my 12 seeds here, all right? And they're seeded correctly, okay? They're seeded correctly. This isn't like who I think the top 12 teams in the rankings are going to be at the end of the season. Now, this is the playoff, bro. So, here we go. Where should we start? You know what? I'm going to start at 1 because you should know what my top 4 is based off the conference champions I've already given in these past few episodes. And also the later seeds, that's the more interesting stuff, to see who really made it. So, at the 1 seed, the only thing interesting here with the top 4 is with the order, right? And I had to think a little bit about this order, and it's probably going to surprise you. I will say, just to let you know, I have changed one thing about conference champions. I now have Ohio State winning the Big Ten because of Oregon's losing Evan Stewart, their best receiver. Looks like for the entire season. That's a huge loss for Oregon, and I think that's going to hurt them quite a bit. I still think they'll be good, and they'll still be mentioned here, but I got to put Ohio State above them right now. So Ohio State, I have winning the championship. But at 1, I have Clemson. And sure, that's probably surprising to a lot of people. But here's my mindset. I think Clemson has the best chance of getting the 1 seed out of anybody because Clemson plays in my opinion, by far the weakest conference out of the 4, the ACC, which is full of nothing but garbage. The second best team you would probably say is Miami, who I think is going to not be nearly as good this year as they were last year. And I think Clemson is going to be very good. I see them as a top 5 team. Now, the thing is, you would think that, an undefeated team is probably going to be that number 1 seed. Maybe, if someone goes undefeated, or if one of these conference champions goes undefeated. And again, I think Clemson has the best chance of doing that. Even though, obviously, they have LSU week 1. And as you know, I'm going to be picking LSU to win that game because I think LSU is the better football team, and I think they really need to win that game. But even if Clemson were to lose that game, 11-1, winning the ACC in dominant fashion, I think would easily be enough to give them the 1 seed. That's just my mindset. Okay, so that's why I gave Clemson the 1 seed because I think it has the most likelihood of happening. At the 2 seed, I have Georgia. And Georgia simply has a harder schedule than Clemson. Georgia has to face Alabama, has to face Texas, has to face Ole Miss. Florida is getting better and better. They have to go to Tennessee, which isn't as hard of a game now as it was when they had Nico, but still, it's never fun going into Neyland. Georgia Tech is getting better and better and is a dark horse to win the ACC. So, you never know how good that Georgia Tech win will look at the end of the season. Auburn, we'll see how they are. But Georgia simply has a harder schedule, so I just don't think it makes a lot of sense to put them at the 1 seed. I think it makes more sense to put them at the 2 seed because the reality is, just like last season, even if Georgia has, 2 losses? 3? Was it 2 or 3? Because Georgia lost to Alabama, they lost to Ole Miss. Am I missing someone? I don't think so. They had 2 losses going into the SEC championship game, and then beat Texas twice, and they were still the 2 seed. So I think giving Georgia the 2 seed makes a lot of sense there. 3 seed, that's where I have Ohio State. I think Ohio State does have the potential to go undefeated this season. Because I think the Big Ten is always overrated personally. It just kind of comes down to a matter of, is Penn State actually going to be an improved version? Can they actually get over the hump? I doubt it. And then I think they play Oregon. That Oregon game again should be interesting. But obviously Texas is that big one, but that doesn't affect obviously whether or not they make the Big Ten championship game. But a loss there could find themselves at the 3 seed because they wouldn't have as impressive of a resume. And for Texas Tech, the Big 12 just has too much parity for me to trust putting Texas Tech any better than the 4 seed. I have a feeling that the committee is going to stray away from putting the group of 6, group of 5, whatever champion, the best team out of those conferences in the top 4 seeds. I think they're going to try and stray away from that because the team that got the 5 seed last year, being Penn State, just had such an easy run because of it. So I think that no matter what, that group of 5 team is going to be the 12 seed. So because of that, I'm putting Texas Tech at the 4 seed. And just to skip to that group of 5 team, at the 12 seed, I have Boise State again. I think Boise State is consistently the best team out of those out of the group of 5, and I just need to see someone overtake them in order to change my mind about that. Could it be a Tulane? It absolutely could be. But again, I need to see it to believe it. But here's where we get interesting. 5 through 11. At 5, I have LSU. I have them in the SEC championship game against Georgia. I have them losing, obviously, and I think that gets them the 5 seed. Obviously, Texas got what was Texas? Texas was the 5 seed, weren't they? Yeah. Texas got the 5 seed last year as the runner-up in the SEC championship game, and I can see LSU being the same. The only concern I have with them being the 5 seed is that I think there's a potential for them to make the SEC championship game but not go undefeated in the regular season because of that Clemson game, because they face Alabama. And I don't know if I trust Brian Kelly and LSU to not slip up one game. But, I'm going to give my trust in them because I have been calling my shot about them all season. So I'm going to put them at the 5 seed. The 6 seed, that's where I have Oregon. I would have had Oregon at that 3 seed where Ohio State is, but I had to push them back to 6 because of the Evan Stewart injury. Now, I believe that Dan Lanning has done such a good job, not just in the transfer portal, but also in recruiting, to where I still think Oregon has so much talent on that team, but I don't think it's possible for this team without Evan Stewart to be as good as they were last year. I think they will have a significant drop off, but I still think they'll be good enough to get that 6 seed in the playoff. 7 seed, I have Texas. The reality is that Texas has a super easy schedule. It's harder than it was last year because some of the teams have gotten better, like Florida, for example. But I still don't trust it. I still think that, and while I have my doubts about Arch Manning and especially about Steve Sarkisian in big games, late game play calling, I think it's impossible for this Texas team not to make the playoff. I think they're simply too talented. And so I have them slotted here at the 7 seed. That just makes a lot of sense, especially if I don't have them making the SEC championship game this year. At 8, that's where I have Penn State. A lot of people are going to have Penn State locked in. If they're not a top 4 seed, they're that 5 seed. You know how I feel about Drew Aller. You know how I feel about Penn State. You know how I feel about James Franklin. But obviously, you have to have them in there because, once again, as I've said before, the Big Ten is a weak conference. It just is. If you think it isn't, you're a moron. Second of all, James Franklin and Penn State, while they struggle to win the big games, they have always done a very good job at making sure to beat the opponents that they are for sure better than. That while they don't win in the big moments, they don't lose to teams they're not supposed to. And that will be enough to get them into the playoff. I have them at the 8 seed. So those are the teams who will play in the first round as the home team. Now we get to the teams who will still be in the first round, but they'll be on the road. other than Boise State, which I've already named at 12, who I'll have at LSU, where they will get absolutely stomped into oblivion. At 9 seed, going to Penn State, I have Notre Dame. I think at this point you have to have trust and faith in Marcus Freeman that he's clearly a good enough coach to get this team to the playoff every year. I debated whether they should be higher than 9. I have my concerns. I think they lost quite a bit on defense. They're bringing in a new quarterback. I don't necessarily trust Notre Dame offensively under Marcus Freeman. I do trust them defensively, even though they lost quite a bit in the draft. Notre Dame's a team that they're going to have to prove it to me, and they'll have plenty of opportunities. They face Texas A&M again this year. They face Miami this year, first game of the season. So, Notre Dame really has a chance to prove that they, can be, a 5 seed, a 6 seed if they can win a lot of these games. But with a new quarterback, I'm just not sure they can. I think they'll drop 1 or 2 games, which will put them at the 9 seed on the road at Penn State, which should be a really fun game. And it'll be a rematch to last year's semifinal, just of note. Adding some cinematic value here, some storyline value. At 10, going to Austin, Texas, I have Illinois. There's a lot of talk about Illinois being really good this year. Altmaier coming back to be their quarterback. Brett Bielema has this team as, he's done really well at Illinois so far. And this is supposed to be one of their better years. And look, maybe I'm sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit here, having them here in the playoff. But I think once again, with the Big Ten being as weak of a conference as it is, it's not crazy to me that Illinois this year can easily be this year's Indiana. We saw last year with Indiana having a very weak schedule. They got into the playoff not having to face much competition. And I think Illinois can do similar things. I think they can get in, only lose 1 or 2 games, and they can find themselves easily at that 10-11 seed. So that's where I have them. Kansas State, I have at the 11 seed. This is a year where I think you can see two Big 12 teams make it into the playoff, and obviously I have Kansas State as my runner-up in the Big 12 championship game. So I have them going to Eugene, Oregon. Again, I think this year you can see a lot of interesting teams in this playoff because, as I have stated before, I don't think there's going to be a truly great team this upcoming season. Now, could someone prove me wrong? Sure. But you look at a lot of the top teams, Texas, bringing in a new quarterback. And as much as people think that Arch Manning is the second coming, he has to prove it to me. Playing 3 terrible teams and doing great does not prove it to me. He has a chance week 1 against Ohio State to do that. Ohio State, they lost a ton of talent, and Julian Sayan's going to have to prove it to me. LSU also has a ton of talent, and I think they have a chance to be a great team, but Brian Kelly has to prove it to me that he can coach this team to greatness. Oregon, the loss of Evan Stewart, also bringing in a new quarterback. Penn State, don't make me laugh. Georgia, bringing in a new quarterback. Every year they lose quite a bit to the draft. Clemson obviously is bringing back a lot of people, so you would think if there could be a great team, it could be them, and it might be. If it is, great. I have them at the 1 seed, so at least I'll be right. But we'll see. Notre Dame bringing in a new quarterback, lost quite a bit to the draft. Like Alabama, new quarterback. Like there's just a ton. I think there's going to be a ton of parity this year. That's what I think. And I think that's how you can get a team like Illinois and get a team like Kansas State, get a team like Texas Tech into this playoff. Obviously, there has to be a Big 12 team, obviously, like Arizona State last year. But I have Kansas State at the 11th seed. That's just a team I believe in to be the second best team in the Big 12. And I think they could be at that 11 seed if they go 9-3, if they go 10-2. And I think that's doable for them. I think they have a really good coach. It's just their quarterback is Avery Johnson. He's going to have to prove it to me that he can be a consistent thrower of the football mixed with his great mobility. But that is my top 12. Let me see if I can look up, let's see, college football playoff bracket. Should I go ahead and give my national champion? Because I want to make sure I get the matchups right in the second round. Okay. So 7. Okay. So the winner of 5 and 12 plays the 4 seed. So I would have LSU beat Boise State, obviously. And then they would play Texas Tech. And so we'd have LSU versus Texas Tech in the second round. And then let's see, 6 and 11 will then face 3. So I would probably have Oregon beat Kansas State, and we would have Oregon, Ohio State in the second round, which is interesting. Let's see, 7 and 10 will face the 2. So I would have Texas beat Illinois, and then we'd have, guess what? Texas, Georgia. This is kind of one of the issues with this playoff. Let me just put that out there. And then 8-9 will play the 1. I would have Notre Dame beat Penn State because you know how I feel about Penn State, and we get Notre Dame Clemson. I would have LSU beat Texas Tech for sure. I would have Ohio State beat Oregon. I'd have Georgia beat Texas, and I would have Clemson beat Notre Dame. So then you would end up with Clemson versus LSU and Ohio State versus Georgia. Sorry, I'm laughing about that because I'm just picturing my brother-in-law, who's an Ohio State fan, and the chaos that would ensue. Plus, my mother is an LSU fan, so that's just a ton of chaos right there. Which obviously means Clemson's winning the national championship, so none of the three of us can get that glory. But that's what I would have as my final four. And look, I'm going to be honest with you. Everyone here, if you've listened at all, you know I'm a Georgia fan. And I will admit it's hard to put my bias towards Georgia aside for even this, even though I try, because I love my team. I bleed red and black, you know what I'm saying? And like last year, I predicted Georgia for a lot of things because I'm a Georgia fan, and I like being loyal. And so just to be, and look, to be fair, I was correct about Georgia winning the SEC. Just saying. But I think so that we have, instead of me just coming on here saying, "Oh, I have Georgia winning the Natty every single year," what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you the team that I think will win the Natty, pretending Georgia does not exist, because I want to be fair. Okay? I want to be fair, and I want to give you an honest opinion that isn't just, oh, Georgia's going to win every single year. Okay? So if we're pretending like Georgia, let's just say that Ohio State beats this team that doesn't exist, right? And Ohio State finds himself in the Natty. Who do I think would win between Clemson and LSU? It would be a rematch. And it kind of works out perfectly because if you think about it, they'll play week 1. Let's say Clemson wins, and that's why they're the 1 seed, because they have an undefeated regular season. They beat LSU, who's a great team. But then they find themselves back having to play LSU again, and LSU beats them this time in the rematch, and then LSU wins the national championship. That's right. If Georgia were to not exist, the team that I have winning the national championship in 2025-2026 season is the LSU Tigers. I feel as if I have talked nonstop about how I feel about LSU since January. Since before last year's national championship even took place, I've been telling you how good I think LSU is going to be. I've planted my flag on this. I believe it fully. And I believe LSU is 100% a national title contender. And if I put all biases aside about Georgia, I would have LSU winning the national championship. Okay? Beating, let's say, Ohio State. Okay? That's how I feel. And it may not be Ohio State in the national championship. Maybe they beat Georgia in the national championship. It's possible. As a rematch from the SEC championship game. Again, it's possible. But that's where I'm going right now. Personally, I wouldn't mind if it's not Georgia. I wouldn't mind LSU winning the national championship because I'm telling you now, if LSU does win the national championship, you best believe I'm coming up. I'm coming on this mic, and you will probably get an hour-long episode of me yelling at this microphone about how I know ball. Okay, about how I know ball, and all these analysts on ESPN should be fired, and I should take their place. Okay, just letting you know. Just letting you know. I hope everyone has a great day. It is just raining cats and dogs outside right now. But so I'm not going to tell you to go and enjoy the beautiful weather outside because it's not here. Okay, so if you can't enjoy the beautiful weather, well, sorry, wait. If I can't enjoy the beautiful weather, you can't. So, all that regardless, I hope everyone here has a great day. Do not forget, when it comes to anything in your life, go out there and be great.